Okay, so maybe some more people will join in a few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. And Joanna, yeah, so I'm going to go over one chapter today, and then when we come back, I'll go over the other two, which are the plant form and the seeded plants. So for today, we're going to do seedless plants, but then I also wanted to show you all some other stuff. As far as seedless plants, there might be some that you know that they're plants, you just didn't know that they didn't have seeds. So like in the picture here, there's quite a few plants that don't have seeds, and then there are some that do like have seeds. So from the picture on the screen, can you tell me which plants do you think? Which ones do not have seeds from this picture? I'll put it in the chat. Which plants from the picture do you think don't have seeds? And then Joanna, yes, that one would be with Respondus. So you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Which plants do you all think in this picture don't have seeds? Okay, very good. So the ferns are, well, they're all over the place, but there's some in the front. So yeah, ferns, those do not have seeds. Is there anything else in the picture that you think does not have seeds? Y'all can take a guess, it's okay. Yeah, that's true. The mosses, they do not have seeds. Very good. So from this picture, I mean, there might be others, but from what I can see, it would be moss, which is what's covering the tree, and then the ferns. There might be some other ones in there, but from what I can see, I mean, I can't. But those are the two that I saw, and those don't have seeds. But the trees do have seeds. So those have seeds. Is there anything else in this picture that I can really see? I mean, besides the trees, I mean, that's it. So definitely seeds do, or trees have seeds, but these other plants, they don't have seeds. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit more about them. But before we talk about that, I wanted to share this with you. This last weekend, I went to this place. It's called Salinenio, Texas. It's near Roma, and this is where my family is from. It's a very small town, and it's right on the river. So this is the Rio Grande River, and then that's my grandma. My grandma, she wanted to put her feet in the river. But we hadn't gone in I don't know how many years. We hadn't actually gone like together. It was me, my mom, and my grandma, just us that we went. And it's gorgeous. So I kind of just wanted to share that with you all. And some sad things about that area is they do want to put a border wall, like literally right there, like where my grandma is. They want to put a border wall, probably a few feet away. And so there is a court hearing in the next 2 weeks to see if we can not have that border wall there. And I kind of wanted to show you some other things that are there. This is some of the walking trails when I was there this weekend. On the news, I think I saw some people saying that there's a crisis at the border, that there's a lot of migrants coming through. But I can tell you that when I was there, nobody was there. Literally nobody was there. It was just quiet, very peaceful, lots of birds. It was a really pleasant experience. These pictures I had my mom send me. I didn't take any pictures, but there's a birding preserve there, and it's just 2 acres. And so that sign that says the Valley Land Fund, what they do in the valley here in the Rio Grande Valley is they'll accept donated land, or they will purchase land and then they just leave it alone, just so that it can turn back into its native habitat. And then it promotes a lot of birds, or it attracts a lot of birds. And so my mom had sent pictures, but they weren't really that good. So let me show you like some of the birds that we saw. And my mom and my grandma, they don't really go out so much. And so they had never seen like cardinals. They had never seen green jays or orioles. So let me kind of show you. Let's see if I can share my screen. really quick. There we go. Share. So I can't really, can you all tell me if you can see my screen? Just unmute yourself really quickly. Can you see my screen? It should have birds on it. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So these are green jays. This picture here, this bright orange one, this is an oriole, and then there's a red one, there's a cardinal. So like these birds, you'll find here in the Rio Grande Valley, but it's not like as common, right? You mostly will see the grackles, which are the blackbirds. Those are more urban birds, but these birds, they require that native habitat. And so this is a picture of what it looks like there along the river. And that they have that at the entrance. But like all of these birds, people will come from Canada, they'll come from all over just to see these birds that we have here in our local area. And so I wasn't sure how familiar you guys were with like how beautiful the birds are that we have in this area, and how unfortunate it is about that border wall. So that's something that I'm currently working on. I have a meeting with our Congressman Vicente Gonzalez March 30th to talk about that. So, but I did want to kind of show y'all, just to show you how pretty it is, how pretty all these birds are. So let me go back to where I was. This always confuses me. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I wanted to show you that really quickly before we get into the chapter. So as far as like where plants came from, they were descended from algae, and I included this picture so that you can kind of see what algae looks like. And I'm sure you've seen it before. You can find it like in canals, ponds, and stuff like that. Sometimes you'll see it a lot like after a big rain, and so that will be because there will be probably a lot of nitrogen on the top of land, and then the rain will come and move that nitrogen from the land to the pond or stream or wherever it is. And so then it causes what we call like an algae bloom. But I wanted to include that picture if you weren't sure. So algae, there's different types of algae. Some algae types are plants and then some are not. So like the one in the picture is not a plant. It's actually a protist. But it has plant traits, meaning like it can photosynthesize. So it's autotrophic, it makes its own food. So this is where plants came from. They came from algae, and they came from a water source, like they really came from the ocean. And so then what we're going to talk about is how they were able to transition from water to the terrestrial life or land. But just know that this is where plants came from. Plants came from or descended from algae. So when they came onto the land, there were some things that I guess they needed to refine. Like once you're coming out of the ocean, you're more prone to desiccation. That's the word that we like to use. Desiccation means to dry out. So the way that you protect yourself from drying out is to have what we call like a waxy cuticle. And maybe you've felt it on a plant, like it's kind of waxy. That waxy cuticle is what helps keep that plant from drying out. So that's one of the things that plants do. And then we'll go over a few other ways. And then also at the bottom of the slide, they mentioned fungi. So there is a known symbiotic relationship with fungi and plants. And so typically at the roots of a plant, you will always find a type of fungus. Usually it's Mycorrhizae, that's the name of the fungus, Mycorrhizae. And so what fungi do is we know that they're decomposers. They break down dead organic matter. And so once they break down the dead organic matter, the plant is able to uptake more nutrients. It's more readily available for a plant to uptake. And then as far as what the fungi gets out of that relationship, I guess they say that it gets a place to live. But just know that that relationship is there, that plants have a relationship with fungi. And then this is a picture of kind of the descendants, right? We start with algae, and then they start to get more, I don't want to say specific, but maybe more intricate, or more advanced, possibly. So these that we have on the far right are the angiosperms and the gymnosperms. Angiosperms is anything that flowers. So trees flower. Well, not all trees, but some trees do flower, like an orange tree flowers, apple trees. Actually, anything that produces a fruit has a flower. Maybe some uncommon ones that we might not think of are like grass. Grass does have a flower. Maybe when you've noticed when you don't mow your lawn and you let the grass grow for quite a bit, at the end of the grass there'll be, it doesn't look like a typical flower, but it is a flower. So grasses can flower. I'm trying to think of other things that are uncommon that flower. But yeah, so anything that has a flower is what we consider an angiosperm. The other one, the gymnosperms, those are going to be things that have like pine cones, which we don't typically have down here in the Rio Grande Valley, but there are a few. They're not native, like people have them in their yards, but anything that has a pine cone we do consider to be a gymnosperm. So both of those, gymnosperm and angiosperms, those have seeds, right? Those have seeds. So the ones that we're talking about today is pretty much anything except those. So anything to the left of gymnosperms and angiosperms do not have any seeds. So what do we have? Mosses, liverworts, all of those. And then I cut a fern from my my yard, and I'll kind of show you that in a second so you can kind of get a look at it. So these are some of the things that we had mentioned earlier with you all about some adaptations, the waxy cuticle, the stomata. Let me go to the chat. Does anyone remember what is a stomata? Anybody know that one? What is a stomata? Yes, it does open and close, Valeria. Do you happen to know where, so this might be a little bit more specific, but do you know where on the leaf the stomata is located? It might be a little bit too specific. I'm not sure if that was anywhere in like your readings, but the stomata is going to be on the bottom side of a leaf. And you know what? I used to do, see if I can find a picture really quickly. Give me 1 second. What I used to do with students is that you can get a leaf and you put clear nail polish on the underside of the leaf, and then you let it dry, and then you can put a piece of tape, lift it up, and then you can see like all of the little stomatas. It's actually really cute. But let me see if I can find a decent picture. Let me move y'all so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, cool. So you should be able to see what I'm looking at. But yeah, they're on the underside of the leaf. And I kind of want a better picture. But you might remember it from maybe one of your other classes when you were like in junior high. They talk about the guard cells. That's what opens and closes. But they're like little pores. So on this structure, let's see if I can get a better. I mean, that one is okay. These are maybe better. I don't know if you can kind of see it. I'm sure you kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. But so this is where gas exchange occurs. So they intake CO2 and they let out oxygen. But the unique thing about plants is that they actually do both. They do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So, but this is where the gas exchange actually occurs. Either they're taking in CO2 or they're taking in oxygen. It's through the stomata that the gas exchange actually occurs. So I wanted to show that to you really quickly. Let me go back to my slide. Okay. And then the other thing that they have, well, actually not all of these have these. So some plants have what we call a xylem and a phloem. And so this is where they intake water from the roots all the way up to the shoots. The phloem is going to be for glucose. So like when they do photosynthesize, that sugar is then transported all throughout the plant and it's through that phloem. But not all plants have a xylem and a phloem, only plants that have a vascular system. So those would be things like the fern. Like a fern has a vascular system. It's got a long kind of like stem versus something like moss. Moss doesn't have long stems. And I'm not too sure. Do you all know what moss looks like? Like it's just kind of like, it kind of looks maybe like fuzzy carpet. It's really short. It's probably not going to get any taller than maybe 1 inch to 2 inches. Very, very small. So plants that are really, really short, they don't have a vascular system. So they're not going to have these things like the xylem and the phloem. Patches of curly grass. So grass does have a vascular system, but moss doesn't. Moss is much smaller than grass. Very, very small. It doesn't have that. They don't even have roots either. So things, and I think I have it in another slide, they don't have roots. They have what we call rhizoids, which they're like roots, but they're not true roots. And another adaptation that plants made when they came onto land is they have a specific type of life cycle. Let me kind of, I think I have it in the next slide. And so maybe you saw it when you were doing your lab assignment, but maybe we weren't really sure what it meant. So mostly when we're looking at this picture, in the middle, it says N and 2N, which is haploid and diploid, having 1 set or 2 sets of chromosomes. So before fertilization, right, before the egg and the sperm combine, it's considered to be haploid. But then once they exchange their genetic material, then it becomes diploid. So I wanted to point that out because I wasn't sure if you all saw that. It's kind of in the middle, like it's so small, maybe you didn't really notice it, but in the middle it does have the N, which stands for haploid, and then the 2N is for diploid. And so just wanted to bring that to your attention. Let me see if there's anything else in this diagram that I wanted. Well, actually, you know what? There's a really big one, spores. Let me put that in the thing. Spores. So anything that is a seedless plant, instead of seeds, it'll have is spores. And so spores, they man, and I wish I had a fern that had spores on the bottom. Maybe I do. No, I don't. On the bottom side of like a fern or whatever, you'll see little spores. They're kind of like brown and fuzzy, and maybe you have seen it before if you like to, you know, kind of hang out around some plants. But yeah, they have their spores on the underside of the leaf, and all that they need is a little bit of water. And they need the water because the sperm will travel in the water to get to the egg through the water. It won't happen any other way. So that's why things like the mosses and the ferns, you will only find them in a really like humid or moist environment because they need the water for reproduction. So that's another really big thing, is that they rely on the water for reproduction so that the sperm can get to the egg. Bryophytes, if you see this word, bryophytes is what we associate with like some non-vascular plants, including the mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. Here in the Rio Grande Valley, we don't really have any of these except for the mosses. Like between those three, liverwort, mosses, and hornworts, we only have the mosses. You won't find these other ones here in the Rio Grande Valley. So, but wanted to point that out. Some of the characteristics we went over a little bit earlier, and I don't think I have it in this slide, but another thing is that they have no true roots. They have rhizoids. So that's another characteristic for a non-vascular seedless plant. They don't have any true roots. They have rhizoids, which they act like roots. They're just not as defined. They're simple, highly adapted to diverse terrestrial environments. And then at the bottom it says there, requires water for sexual reproduction. And that's just so that the sperm can get to the egg. It wouldn't be able to otherwise. This is what liverworts look like. And I just put that slide there. I left it there just so that you can kind of see what they look like. But you will notice they're really short. And I wish they had a picture of it farther away. But anything that is a bryophyte is going to be really, really small because they don't have a vascular system. They don't have the xylem and the phloem. Mosses, they talk about, they don't have any true leaves. These words I know are in your lab assignment, the Archegonia and the Antheridia, and I think I have a picture somewhere so you can kind of see them a little bit better. There we go. So here in this picture on the top right, you can see the Antheridia and Archegonia. So I'm not sure how familiar you all are with flower anatomy, but the anther in a flower is the boy part. So when you see Antheridia, that's going to be the male part. Let me put it in the chat. Archegonia is female. So if you do remember at least that the anther in a flower is for a boy, then you'll remember the Antheridia is for a boy. So the Antheridia is where the sperm is, and the Archegonia is for the girl. And so the way that the sperm is able to get to that egg is if there is water present. If there's no water present, then you're not going to get the fertilization. And this picture is pretty similar to the other one where it has the haploid stage, the N, going into the diploid stage, the 2N. And I did like that other picture, so let me go back to it really quickly. I had never noticed this until I started teaching this class, like looking at moss, that when they're in this stage, you can see the sporophyte, like where the spores come out. And I'd never noticed it, I guess because I'd never really looked at moss that closely before. I just was like, oh, okay, moss. But if you ever do look and observe moss, you might be able to see the sporophyte, the gametophyte, and it's actually really, really cool. If we were meeting face to face, I would show you like in person. You could see it under the microscope. But just next time if you do come across moss, just kind of look for that. Maybe you will see a sporophyte. It actually is pretty cool. These we talked about already. Xylem. So, okay. Just for you to remember, I guess, again, vascular tissues is xylem and phloem. Xylem is water from the roots going upwards, going against gravity. And the phloem is going to move around, mostly sugars that are made through photosynthesis. And here it also says hormones, and that's kind of going everywhere. When we see the word tracheophytes, we associate that with vascular plants. So vascular is if they have the xylem and the phloem. These are going to be plants that are a little bit taller. They're able to get bigger because they have the vascular tissue. So anything that doesn't have vascular tissue is going to be small, and then anything that does have vascular tissue is going to be taller. And then, let me see. I think someone else had said that too about registering for the ACT. That's okay. I'm recording it anyway, so whatever you missed, I'll have it uploaded for you guys. But I wanted to get to the fern chart so I can see, well, no, it's okay. Lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys. Okay, as far as stems, roots, and leaves, so some really cool things about leaves. I remember one of my classmates, like a few years back, had given the analogy for leaves that they're kind of like little solar panels. And so like they get larger because they're trying to absorb as much light as they can so that they can photosynthesize. So maybe that'll kind of help you remember it. Like leaves, what is their purpose? Like here it says to increase surface area, and so that's why. So leaves are kind of like little solar panels so that they can photosynthesize. Roots, you know that they uptake water, and so a lot of people aren't really familiar with like watering plants. Like people will, like my grandpa used to do it. My grandpa used to just spray the tree when really all you have to do is put the water at the base of the plant because the water is absorbed through the roots. So just making sure. And as far as a stem, inside of the stem is where you'll find the xylem and the phloem. So, but okay, let's go to the next one. Do you all have questions as for right now? And then Valeria, let me see, just in case, where would the recording be? Valeria, I'll put the recording on YouTube, and then I'll post it probably in the, I can post it in the folder and also in the announcements page. Does anybody else have any questions for right now? No? Okay. Okay, so all the plants that we mentioned earlier, they don't have seeds, they have what we call spores. And then it wasn't until that we got seeds, like actual seeds, that plants can move farther away from water. So they can move farther away from rivers and streams and the oceans. And now you can have plants more, I guess, just farther away because they have a seed. And so what a seed does is it has a seed coat, which is a protective outer layer. And so what's cool about seeds is that they can be like, you can just have them for hundreds of years. You can harvest a seed, and as long as it's, I guess, not hurt, it'll be fine for hundreds of years. And so that's kind of how it works when you clear land. If you give it some time, all of the natives come back. It could be, yeah, that birds will bring seeds, but a lot of it too is that the seeds are still in the soil and all they need is just a little bit of water and they'll start to germinate and grow again. So that's really cool. So seeds having that seed coat was a big deal as far as how plants were able to move away from water. So having a seed was super important. And when you think of a seed or a spore, it's very similar to just like a little embryo. That's all that it is. An embryo, also if you weren't aware, like seeds have embryos. It's just like a baby plant. And so all that, just kind of like a human, how they have their little embryo, they do need mom's nourishment. A seed wouldn't. A seed is unique in the way that it doesn't need anything. All of the food is inside of the seed. And so that's why if you eat things like peanuts, or I'm trying to think of any other type of seeds, they have a lot of fat. And so that fat is what fuels the baby plant. That's what lets the plant just prosper on its own. And so it won't need anything until it, I guess, germinates and creates its own leaves. Once it makes its own leaves, then it can photosynthesize and then it's set. It's fine for life. It has leaves and then it has rain and that's all that it needs. But initially the seed doesn't need anything at all. It just needs water. It'll germinate and it's fine. So that's kind of interesting. And then there they also mention, what is it? Fruits in the flowering plants, also known as angiosperms, add a layer of protection to seeds and attract animals. That's true too. So like the purpose of a flower is that it's pretty. Also it smells nice. So that's kind of what will attract a pollinator or an animal, is the scent as well as the color. If it's vibrantly colored, that's very attractive. So those are the purpose of like fruits as well as flowers, that they're attractive to pollinators and so that they can kind of get them to come. So that's also kind of a cool thing. I think this is the same picture that we saw last time, except that it has on the bottom some kind of like some unique traits. So like where seeds started right there where it has the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. The stomata that we talked about earlier happens right before the mosses, and so that's kind of cool. And then our ancestor is what we mentioned earlier, algae. So our pterophytes, we mentioned, we call it pterophyte, kind of like how you would read pterodactyl, which is the dinosaur, the flying dinosaur. You don't pronounce the P. So here it's the same thing, pterophytes, like a pterodactyl. They are, I mostly associate pterophytes with just the ferns. So any fern is going to be a pterophyte. And we had already pretty much talked about them earlier. They need to be near the water because they need the sperm to get to the egg so that it can form a spore. And then, well, here are the ferns again. And that's what a fern looks like. All of my ferns in front of my house died. I'm not sure. Does anybody have any ferns? And did they live or did they die during the freeze? Pretty much everything in my front yard just died. My pollinator garden died. I had a few survive, but for the most part, everything died. How about you all? Did you all have your plants die off at your house? You can put it in the chat if you all had any luck with your plants. Everything at my house died. Everything at my mom's house, my grandma's house, which is good because my grandma didn't have any natives. So I already told my grandma that I'm going to plant a bunch of natives in her yard now that I have the chance. I think this is one of the last slides for the ferns. This is how they look. They have a frond, and I'm not sure if y'all have seen this before, but this is kind of just how it's unique how a fern will grow from a frond and then it unfurls into the fern. We call these fiddleheads. So I'm not sure if you all have seen these, but they're really cute. I like them. Valeria, your grass turned, yeah, it should be turning back to green because we already had a little bit of rain last week. Maybe it was a few days ago. That's what happened to my grass. My grass turned all brown and then we had a little bit of rain, so now it's a little bit green. Probably the same for you too. And then this is the last slide. So this is very similar to the other ones that we had looked at. This is the same thing where we have spores, and the spores, they kind of like, I don't know what word I want to use, like hatch, maybe. They kind of, they hatch, and then you have the sperm going to the egg, and that's only going to occur if there's water. Then you have fertilization, and then it forms into a little baby plant, which is the fern. And that's it. That's all that I have as far as the fern stuff. Do you all have questions about the material or anything else in the class? Let me know if you have questions about the material we went over today or about anything else in the class. Also, I wanted to say that if you have missed assignments, I think I had made an announcement, but just to let me know so that I can work with you, because I know it's been very difficult. We had the winter storm, like COVID is still happening. So if you need anything reopened, you just need to let me know, and then I can work with you as much as I can. But you do need to let me know. I mean, let me know if you need help, and then I can help you all out. Okay. Well, then I'm going to stop. I'll stop recording